What the hell was that? This is the process shot. I'm Michael. I'm not sure if I want to call this a movie. It would be an insult to any form of visual media. I mean, it's got a cast, a crew, a director, a writer, a script. Screw it, I'll get this over with. Cheaper by the Dozen is a series of scripted events pretending to be a newly made family comedy film. Directed by Gail Lerner, it follows the Baker family, from parents and business partners Paul and Zoe, to their 9 children and 1 nephew, whose demographics range from toddlers to teenagers. Between a number of other antics involving those kids, which generally go without much attention, the main narrative involves Paul trying to get the ball rolling on a home business venture, branching out his local restaurant by selling a special sauce that he's developed at retail markets. With 2 rather unnerving investors on board, he moves the family from Los Angeles to Calabasas for some reason, where the aforementioned antics ensue, and Paul learns a valuable lesson about, well, family, I guess. Also, there's a lot of talk about racism in this movie, right when it remembers that it needs to have a conflict. This movie has a lot of problems on its hands, and it doesn't do much to mitigate any of it. It clearly wants to tell multiple stories of the Baker family at once, but there's very little flow between these scenes, nor any sense of cohesion between stories, and so the subplots all feel separate from each other and the main storyline. It doesn't help when many of these various plot points and story beats are introduced or reached in unnatural, often forced manners. The most common being characters up and telling another character about something that happened off screen, and in a few cases without any previous foreshadowing at all. It makes for a pretty hectic movie that hops from story to story with few smooth segues, and from character to character without any additional depth to their personalities or subplots. It's probably easiest to say that any story element only hits the bare minimum of effort, and any progression that is made is done entirely through dialogue rather than action, leading to a number of scenes where 2 or more characters are just talking about their problems out loud instead of letting the audience see the choices being made instead. That's not even getting into the movie's attempts at trying to intercut deeper themes of racism, which seems slapped into the movie rather than being introduced naturally. It doesn't help that these ideas don't show up until after the first half hour or so, and then any major moments that involve racism and profiling also tend to feature a straw man character who is blatantly meant to be antagonistic and hated by the audience. It's extremely reductivist, and almost trivializes the whole thing by way of being so tilted and unsubtle that it seems more like they just wanted to include these scenes to pretend that the story has something relevant to talk about. Anyways, even if you disregard the story and all, Cheaper by the Dozen still only puts in minimal effort in its technical department. There's next to nothing cinematic that appears on screen, with the overall image being flat and uninteresting, doing more to show the cheapness of the production through a combination of location shots, very few extras, and a good amount of stock footage. That's not to mention stale cinematography that makes sure that everybody's visible in a master shot and reading their lines correctly, with little to no variation in creative choices, and using flat colors that make this happy-go-lucky comedy come through with gray and neutral tones. Editing is similarly a bit stale, seemingly driven to make sure that every character within a scene gets an equal amount of screen time, but either coming off as unnecessarily rapid or a noticeably bland back and forth between speakers. As for the music, it's almost pretty much entirely licensed, and it's all very forgettable. Hell, pretty much everything about this movie is forgettable, though whether or not it's because it's inherently uninteresting or because your brain is refusing to commit any of it to memory remains to be seen. Cheaper by the dozen. Gail Lerner, 2022. Half a star. I do not recommend watching this at all, unless you really hate yourself one day and decide to choose pain. That's it for me. If you like this review, leave a like. If you have something to add, leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. I forgot to mention, this movie has a lot of product placement in it, like a Sony movie, but it's a Disney film. If they're so strapped for cash that they need to get in some name drops, the economy must really be toast.